So colostrum is the first food that all baby mammals receive, or all natural baby mammals receive. So when we were born, our mother's breasts were initially filled with colostrum before actually there was any milk available to us. And in an ideal circumstance, that's the first thing we drink. Well, the same is true for all mammals, and it's especially true for cows. One of the interesting things about bovine colostrum, cow colostrum, is it has a really unique impact on human health. This has been studied for a really long time. There are literally thousands of studies in the scientific literature showing the effects of bovine colostrum on human health, on human immunity, on restoring the gut lumen, the gut tract, repairing damage to the gut, and helping to restore health after things like IBS or Crohn's or diverticulitis or any of the sort of inflammatory bowel diseases. And it does this through a number of actions, but primarily through the fact that it contains all of the known mammalian growth factors. And these proteins that we call growth factors initiate growth in tissue throughout the body. And each type of tissue in our body has a specific growth factor. Well, they're all found in colostrum. And so one of the really wonderful things is that colostrum kind of goes throughout the body, unlocking growth keys, getting our body to produce new, fresh, healthy tissue everywhere. And that makes it really wonderful for people who are exercising, people who are looking for recovery, from people who are healing from past injuries or past surgeries or from a lifestyle that was detrimental to their health. This becomes an all-around really wonderful food for anybody who's looking for anti-aging type benefits and rejuvenation. And essentially, I think it's a really optimal food for just about everybody because it restores tissues on every level.
I love that. So as far as the casein or lactose, I know a lot of people have questions about that. Is there any casein or lactose in colostrum?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we tend to think of colostrum like it's a dairy product, but it's helpful to think of it really more as a product that's produced in the blood. And it fills into the mammary gland, and it's consumed the same way that milk will later be consumed, but it's not milk and it's not really a dairy product. There are trace amounts of lactose and casein that can be found there, but that are below the levels that trigger inflammatory issues or allergic reactions for most individuals. So people who are sensitive to casein and lactose are not, in most cases, ever sensitive to colostrum.
A lot of people talk about the connection between IGF-1 growth factor and cancer. Is there a connection there?
Well, there is some connection in the literature, and what we see is that IGF-1 certainly does not cause or promote cancer, but what can happen in an unhealthy body is that the growth factor can cause tissue growth throughout the body, and so somebody who's on a really unhealthy diet and has a lack of antioxidants in their diet and is living a lifestyle that promotes cancer, IGF-1 in that case is not a great substance for people. Now, that though, we're talking about IGF-1 in isolation. So it's important to understand that lots of foods contain IGF-1 as part of their overall food matrix. And colostrum is one of these cases where IGF-1 is rich in this food, but it's rich with an entire matrix of other compounds that are anti-proliferative. So we don't have to worry about these food sources of IGF-1 being the cancer promoter. However, somebody who is in a precancerous or cancerous situation certainly wouldn't want to inject IGF-1 into their bodies, as an isolated pharmaceutical.
I see. So it's the buffering compounds that also work with IGF-1 to mitigate the...
Correct. I mean, obviously nature doesn't feed, a cancer-promoting food into newborn babies, everywhere in the mammal kingdom. That wouldn't really make sense. Yeah. So one of the challenges is we tend to take a lot of this data out of context, and sometimes we see negative effects from an isolated substance that doesn't have negative effects. It's part of its whole food.
The colostrum in your product, does it come from a clean source? Is it coming from grass-fed cows and these types of things?
So our colostrum comes from cows all over the United States, and it's only U.S. cows. That's important because most of the colostrum coming into the U.S. market comes from other countries where there are really different regulations. All of our colostrum is U.S., and all of our colostrum goes through a series of testing looking for traces of pesticides, heavy metals, herbicides, and anything like that would be a contaminant, to include genetically modified bovine growth hormones. So our colostrum is actually the cleanest cleanest grade on the market, but it's also the most intact grade as well. And when I say that, I mean that it's really rich in all of its oils, which is another important part, because a lot of the colostrums that are available out there have been stripped of their fats in an effort to try to keep a poorly dried colostrum from becoming rancid. Our colostrum is dried really well, and so it's intact. So in addition to being really clean, it also tastes really good, really creamy, because it still contains its full complement of lipids.
So it seems like it would be a really good addition to smoothies. People can bake with it too, cook with it?
Yeah, so you can use it anywhere you would use a sort of almost like a protein powder or like a powdered milk. I like to use it in smoothies. That's my favorite way, but it's also really nice in desserts. So people who like to make things like chocolates or puddings, they become wonderful in that. They're really great for making homemade ice creams with, things like that as well. But if you make blended drinks, this is one of the most optimal additions to